Hello and welcome to class number 3. This is the class where we will focus on Etnachta. So the prior video we talked about sof pasuk, which means the end of a verse, and the two accent indicators, or trope indicators as I like to call them, to signify the ending. So in this class, we are going to focus on the next group, the next trope family, called the Etnachta. And the Etnachta, as you can see, has 4 family members. There is something that is similar here as you compare it to sof pasuk. So mercha and tipcha, a little closer, are in fact the same symbols, therefore the same names, and therefore the same melody that we use in sof pasuk. So we actually are going to be learning only 2 new tropes, but of course we will review mercha and tipcha. So as stated in the previous classes, the way you know the name of the family is by the last trope of the family. So in this case, since we have 4 and the order goes from right to left, the tropes we have here are mercha, tipcha, munach, etnachta. So this family is called the Etnachta trope family, or in this case, trope phrase. So with the Etnachta trope family, just like in sof pasuk, in most all families, the order will not change, but the variations will. So who shows up to dinner, so to speak, is how you will differentiate between the full family versus, in this case, we have 5 different variations that often come on their own. The one that I don't have here that can happen is Etnachta by itself, but it does not occur on a regular basis. So we're going to focus on these 5 families in which Etnachta trope family does happen most often. Something that I need to point out that I think hopefully will help is that every name of the tropes, except for specific trope symbols that are intended for primary accents in the first or second syllable, are all catered towards last accented syllable in words. As I mentioned before, 90% of Hebrew has the accent on the end of the word. And all of these trope names are as such. So it's the ones we have in front of us: mercha, tipcha, munach, etnachta. They all have the accents in the end. Therefore, the melody at the end is the melody that we use when we apply them to different Hebrew words. So keep that in mind, okay? So let's go through how this sounds and the variations, and then I'll give you some examples using words that are often commonly used either through liturgy or otherwise. Okay, here we go. Mercha, tipcha, munach, etnachta. So remembering that the equal signs between one Hebrew word to the next means the last note of the first word and the first note of the second word are the same, and therefore they can bleed into each other. They can be sung into each other. So if the first 2, for example, mercha, tipcha. Now it is good for you to be able to separate the words. Otherwise it would create a very different meaning, or really a non-existent meaning. So you do want to separate them, but thinking about the same melody that you ended with to begin a new word can help. Hopefully it will help. So let's take a look at these symbols. So mercha and tipcha, as we know from sof pasuk, are on the bottom, kind of half circles into each other. And munach is this backwards L. And in fact, the shape of munach serves kind of nicely as far as the melody goes. One of my students pointed this out. If you take a look at the munach starting at the top, and the melody for munach is munach. So you start at the top and you munach. It's going down and out. Melody, the trope in this case, can kind of look like that's the melody's doing that. Munach. And then etnachta. I'm a visual person, so I like to find visual cues to help me remember. So for me, the bottom part of what looks like a wishbone could be your etnach, and ta could be at the top for the high note of etnachta. So if you were to visually use this trope to help you remember, I would look at it like this: etnachta. I apologize. I am gaining my voice back from a very busy weekend, as most of you know. So let's look into our variations. So number one, as you can see, is the same as the top, meaning it's the full verse, the full family in action. So here we go. Mercha tibcha munach etnachta. Number two. So now we have mercha missing, but the remaining families, or remaining trope members are there. So we start with tibcha munach etnachta. Great. Number three, we have munach and etnachta present, one right after the other. Munach etnachta. Number four, this is a pretty typically common trope variation. Number four with mercha tibcha and etnachta. Mercha tibcha etnachta. And lastly, number five, we've got tibcha and etnachta. I really want to stress that learning the names of the trope will be very beneficial, in that when you're trying to remember a melody, having something associated to that melody does and can help when you're trying to remember. So if it's just a random melody, you want to be able to solidify, you want to be able to put something with it so that when you think of it, you can sing it and it'll come to you. Hopefully that just made sense. So I'm just stressing the importance of the names of the tropes, so that when you go back to trying to figure out how to sing these, the melody goes along with the name, or vice versa. The melody or the names of the tropes, the melody hopefully will come to mind as well. All right, so number five, we have tibcha etnachta. Wonderful. Okay, so 4 family members. All tropes are on the bottom for the etnachta. Both mercha and tibcha are tropes that are used in sof pasuk, and therefore they are the same. And sometimes by using the symbols themselves, it can offer you some visual cues as to how the melody should go. So with that in mind, I have written up some examples of how this trope could look in Hebrew. So right now we have the Hebrew words from right to left: Yisrael, Eloheinu, Melech, Ata. So 2 out of the 4 words have the accents at the end: Yisrael and Ata. Although Ata can change accents. Sometimes it can be Ata, and sometimes it can be Ata. And that's more Hebrew grammar situation. But for now, we're going to focus on the main accents that does occur in Ata, which is the last syllable. Okay, so now on the first line, we have all 4 family members present: mercha, tibcha, Munach, and Etnachta. And so when we put in these tropes into words, especially when they're on words where the accents are not at the end, trying to figure out how to place the melody is very important. Okay, so what I'm going to do, purposely I put this on top of the sheet so I could show you the tropes and how the dots look. There we go. Okay. And let me give you the names so that also becomes helpful. Perfect. Okay. So we're going to move back a little bit here. There we go. Okay, so remember, like I said, the names of the tropes are intended with the last syllable to become the accent. So when we have words like Eloheinu and Melech, where the accents are either in the middle or the beginning, we have to maneuver the melody so that it fits. So let's just take a look at the first word. Yisrael. Right, so we have Mercha. So you're going to carry that high part of Mercha to the El, right? Yisrael. And then our second word there is Eloheinu. Now think about Tipcha and how it sounds. Tipcha. The melody on Cha, you're going to put that on the Hey and finish it on the Nu of the word Eloheinu. Here's what I mean. Eloheinu. So if the Tipcha trope was actually on the word Tipcha in Hebrew, it would be on the last syllable. But now that we have a Hebrew word that has the accent in the middle syllable, the melody for Tipcha needs to be moved over. So, Eloheinu. And because the syllable Nu is still left over, you need to make sure that you finish the melody and the word by adding it to the last syllable. Eloheinu. Then the next word we have is Melech. We hear this word many times throughout our liturgy, our prayers in the prayer book. And the accent is not typical, but it is a word we've heard so often that putting the accent in any other spot would be very strange. So, Melech with Munach sounds like this. Melech. Again, back to that notion that the tropes are intended for words whose accent is at the end, right? Munach. And since you don't need that beginner sound of mu in the Munach word, you just omit it and go right into the Nach. Melech. Right? So, Munach or Melech. And then Etnachta. So the Ta of Etnachta has the main melody because that word Etnachta, excuse me for the wiggly notion, guys. The Ta in Etnachta is the accented syllable. And our word Ata, it has also the last syllable as the accented syllable. So this one should be relatively easy. Ata. Etnach, the melody for Etnach is the same sound. So there's no need to stretch it any longer than it needs to. So, altogether, the first line with appropriate Hebrew words with the trope of Etnachta sounds like this. Yisrael Eloheinu Melech Ata. Remember, this is just purely for learning purposes. It may not necessarily be exact as far as grammar goes, but just to show you the variations of how the tropes can look. All right, number 2, we have Ata, Melech, and Eloheinu. So now we just move the words around a little bit and considering exactly what we had discussed before. So we have Ata, accents at the end, so Mercha should be pretty easy to put together. Ata. Now we have Tipcha, the Ha, is what we're looking for. And since now the syllable of melech is the first syllable, you're going to put the cha part on the meh of melech. Melech. And since there is no munach, we have a variation of mercha, tibcha, and etnachta. Our etnachta, or the ta of etnachta, has to be placed on the hey of Eloheinu, because that is where the trope has positioned itself. And that's what we also just have come to learn, especially with the word Eloheinu, that the accent is in the middle. Just like we know melech, Eloheinu has its accent in the middle. So we have here Eloheinu. And when you've reached the main melody of your trope, and you still have a syllable or two left over, you carry over the sound that when you've reached the accent. So what I mean is, when you get to hey, the melody on the hey, you just use that same melody and can move it over. Eloheinu. Right? So all together we have Ata Melech Eloheinu. And finally, our third line, another variation, 3 words here. We have tibcha, munach, and etnachta. So 3 out of the 4 in the order. Okay, here we go. So we discussed melech with melech and melech. And now we have the same situation. We have another melech and munach on Yisrael. Last syllable, so that should make it easier. Yisrael. And then etnachta. We had another ata, so think of it that way. Ata. So together it sounds like this. Melech Yisrael ata. Okay. Wonderful. I mean, to be honest, that's really what it's like. I would encourage you to practice these phrases on your own, so you can get a handle on how to use the etnachta. Let me sing for you the final phrase once more. Here we go. Mercha tibcha munach etnachta. Oh, one thing I do want to point out, I do qualify this family as the green family, hence why I use the green marker. What I've done in my own Torah trope teaching is that the main 3 trope families, which we will get to next week as the final of the 3, we have Sof Pasuk, Etnachta, and Zakif Katon, which is our following family that we'll learn next week. I have colored them specifically to mimic a traffic light. Hopefully I said it in the video, but the Sof Pasuk family I use as the red family. When we reach Sof Pasuk, we know Sof is the end. So just like a traffic light, when we have a red light, we stop. So when we reach the Sof Pasuk red family, or trope family in that case, I always color my Sof Pasuks in red. So it visually gives me that, oh, I'm finished, as well as musically, right? Sof Pasuk. It has that feeling that the melody has completed and we're ready to move on. Now for Etnachta, like I said, is green. The Etnachta itself comes from the word to rest in Hebrew. So in a sense, I like to think of the Etnachta as a rest, as a pause. And in English, we think of that as almost like a comma, right? And so what you will always see, well, 99% of the time, you will always see an etnachta in a verse. And therefore, I like to associate etnachta in green because you're always going to go and you're always going to continue. Etnachta will usually be paired right before Sof Pasuk, or sometimes in the beginning of a verse. It really does depend on the phrasing itself, but know that the majority of the time Etnachta will always be in a verse, unless it is a straight up Sof Pasuk only verse, which does happen. And therefore that's really the only time you won't see Etnachta, but that doesn't happen on a regular basis. So I qualify green to Etnachta, as in always going, always there. And then our final family that we'll learn next week is Zakef Katon, and that is our yellow family. So you've got an Etnachta, you're moving along, but sometimes you're not sure in the yellow traffic light whether you should stop when you see it or you have enough juice to go through the yellow. Hopefully make it in and still be in yellow. All right, so with the Zakef Katon yellow family, I think similarly in that when you have a Zakef Katon, sometimes it will show up. Actually, a lot of times it will show up, but not always. It has a less likely chance of showing up than Sof Pasuk, than Etnachta. So since it's the lesser of the three, I give it the yellow color. Okay, so again, we'll get into Zakef Katon next week. But so far, Sof Pasuk has 4 members. All tropes are on the bottom, and they're red. And now Etnachta also has 4 family members. All tropes are at the bottom of a Hebrew word, and the color is green. So I look forward to learning more with you next week when we get into Zakef Katon. Toda Rabah. Thanks for tuning in.